Okay, cool. All right, I got the recording going, got the stream going. All right, let's do the intro and we will let her rip. Hey everyone, Anthony Fantano here, the internet's busiest music nerd. I hope you guys are doing well today. An exciting, exclusive conversation and interview with the one, the only composer, band leader, guitarist, songwriter, Mr. Geordie Greep. His new record, The New Sound, has just come out recently. Reviewed it as well. One of my favorite albums of the year thus far. And really excited to get into it with him over this new album and anything else that comes up in the conversation. Geordie, thank you for taking the time and coming through.
Thanks for having me on, man. It's good to be here. And thank you for the very nice review. Um, you know, it's not to say thank you for it being a good review. Just thanks for it being it seems like you actually listen to the music, which is not necessarily a given in the music reviewer game, which is a sad truth of this cartoon world.
I do try to listen to the music. I feel
Hmm.
like there is at least a slight obligation to do that. If I didn't, I feel like I don't know. I feel guilty on some level if I didn't try to listen to the music.
Yeah, I'd say that's that would be a just feeling, you know?
Yeah, there's for whatever reason that guilt trip doesn't kick in with some people, I suppose.
It's how it goes, bro. That's the world, you know?
All right. Well, I mean, I'm glad you feel like I've listened to the music. I'm doing
Hmm.
something right, I suppose. Um,
Yeah.
I want to thank you for coming out with a record that's worth listening to. Okay. There's some albums I feel like you kind of listen to them one or two times, and you mostly kind of get the gist of it, pretty quickly. Or there's not like layers there to it to kind of dig into, and I feel like there's a lot going on with the new sound on multiple levels, and I'm hoping to kind of get into some of that with you and bring some context to this record that it is kind of creative, but also I think like leaves a lot of questions as well because it's the album is such an insane experience. It's like falling down like a forever spiral staircase in a way. And
Yeah, yeah.
before we kind of dig into the content itself, for a lot of people, and I'll be honest, like when we were listening to this album, especially on stream, there were some people who were like kind of shocked about the quickness with which this album came out. I feel like there's some fans and listeners who haven't even had time to sort of like adjust and process and even learn that you have sort of like transitioned out of Black Midi into doing solo material. There were some people reacting who were like, "Oh, what's going on? This sounds like Black Midi, or this sounds like something Black Midi would do." Oh, well, this is actually a member of the band or somebody who you were already
Mhm.
familiar with his music of. He's just going solo. So, if you could sort of like, educate people who are watching right now, how did we sort of like make this really quick transition from being a part of this, beloved kind of experimental rock trio into dropping a solo record with such efficiency and such a short amount of time, and with it being such an extravagant and very detailed, as detailed an album as it is.
Well, I was already thinking about doing a solo album, you know, from the a few years, like even 1 or 2 years into the band.
Hmm.
It was something that I was thinking in the abstract of like, oh, one day I'd like to do a solo album,
Hmm.
you know? But then a few albums into Black Midi, I thought, well, what's the point of having this thing that I'm going to do one day? If I want to do it, may as well just try, sooner rather than later. And so I was coming up with these songs along the way and coming up with songs that felt like they would lend themselves more to being kind of done in a solo artist way of taking advantage of different musicians rather than being um, in this band format where it's a band and it's got to represent the sound of the band and the sound of each musician and everyone. If they even don't contribute to the songwriting, they would contribute to the sound of the song with how they play their instrument and stuff. I felt like the songs I was coming up with had, for me, I was wanting more of a kind of studio musician sound for them.
Hmm.
So, at some point it just seemed like a necessity and something I really wanted to try. So the recording for the album was kind of in spurts of 2 or 3 days from last September even to this April or May. So it was already kind of going along, doing a bit here and there, and you know, it was a fairly, you know, not to say a overwrought on the huge process, but it wasn't just like a short thing that just came together really quickly. It was something I've been thinking about for a long time, and even when it came to executing it, took place over quite a few months.
Okay, okay. So you're talking about sort of the music on this record coming together in various studio sessions or recording sessions within different periods of time is what you're saying.
Pretty much, and each with each session kind of then going away from that experience and kind of reevaluating what this album is going to be.
Hmm.
So, for example, when we actually, the one of the big lines in the promotion of this album is that we recorded some of it in Brazil.
Hmm.
That was the third session that we had done for it.
Okay.
So once we had done that, it was okay, this has kind of changed the complete thing of this is we know this is going to work working with these musicians who are hearing the song for the first time on a day that they're recording the take, which is the take on the album, and recording a final take for the song, 30 minutes after they've played it for the first time.
Hmm.
So that was a completely new experience for me. It's like a classic experience in the world of recording music, but it was a new experience for me. So to know that that worked, and in fact, that really benefited the songs for me, for in my like for what I wanted out of them, that was a great like, okay, cool. So now we're gonna approach the rest of the album like that, and it really changed how we were looking at it.
Uh,
This is me and Seth, the producer.
right, 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 right. And I did want to quickly ask you how Seth kind of came into the fold, but we can get into that a little later. I want to ask you just because you just mentioned it, like introducing these new musicians that you're working with to some of these songs, as opposed to uh, fellow members of a band who you've been working with for years and maybe have like a certain level of familiarity with. These
Mhm.
musicians that you're working with, in terms of like the song itself that you're introducing them to, like what are you introducing them to at this point? Is it like a demo of the track? And how close was that version of the song to what it ended up being when you guys finally like laid down the final tracks and details of the song? Was there sort of like a lot of changes and evolution stylistically and sonically from point A to point B? Because there's definitely like uh, what's clear is that there's definitely like sort of a Brazilian or bossa nova spin on some of the instrumentals of these tracks that you have to presume on some level is kind of like being brought to the table by the guests who you're bringing onto the album on some level.
I mean, for every song, I did a very comprehensive demo.
Hmm.
So I play keys as well, and I hate kind of music software. I find it really tedious, but you have to use that stuff. So I would make these demos with drum machines and like, even on Logic, there's the algorithmic drummer who can play in any style you want and at any tempo or time signature you want. So he was my friend. And then I would play the guitar and bass and keyboards and really build up to like almost like our friend Jacob Collier, these Logic projects with 200 tracks and stuff. Um,
Shout out to Jacob.
he's doing his thing. And then so I'd make these kind of demos, and then it wouldn't be very produced, but they would basically be very, very close to what the songs ended up being.
Hmm.
I don't like mixing. I find it really boring, so I would never mix them properly. But in the actual musical content and the structure and delivery of the song, it'll pretty much be the same. The stuff that changed was little things. Like for example, when we went to Brazil, we did that song Terra.
Hmm.
And that song, when I originally was doing it on a demo, it was much more kind of salsa that I was trying to do like a Fania, like 70s salsa type song that like Hector Lavoe would sing or something.
Hmm.
Uh, um, so it was much more like the timbales and kind of cowbell and this kind of this kind of thing. But obviously when we went to Brazil, you know, they were hearing it more like a samba, so they played a very different kind of groove and different kind of rhythms on that song. But the kind of structure and chord sequences and musical kind of form of most of basically all of the tracks was the same as the demo. And that was the same way I did it in Black MIDI too.
Hmm.
It was like for the songs that I did, which on the last two albums was, 80% or so, it was this kind of same approach.
Okay, so I mean, well, thank you for shedding light on that. I wanted to ask you also, like with the sort of almost like spotty coming and going sort of process that you had going with these studio sessions. At what point over the course of the evolution of this project did you start to sort of, I guess, come together with what is kind of the narrative and the character portrait of the record? I mean, the vast majority of the tracks on the album, if you're paying attention, sort of seem to like paint a very clear picture of an individual or a personality type. And, at what point did you decide to hone in on that? And, in what fashion was that kind of coming together?
Well, in a similar way to some of the songs musically, sometimes I would finish one song's lyrics and then kind of at the very end have one more line which seemed to go in a different direction, and then that would become another set of lyrics.
Hmm.
So the same thing happened with a musical example is if anyone listens close, at the very end of Terror, it ends on this chord, which is the first chord of the instrumental, the new sound. So that was like I would play the outro of this Terror song and then started playing this other thing and then said, oh wait, this is a whole other song.
Hmm.
So the same thing with some of the lyrics where I would finish one set of lyrics and then think, okay, what about another angle on this same kind of thing? And before I knew it, there was a few songs going down the same road and the same kind of character and the same kind of atmosphere and the same kind of um, subject matter. And I thought, why not? If I've already got two or three, we may as well commit. This is a kind of interesting thing, not much discussed in rock music or whatever. And I also thought it's a kind of pertinent issue on the last 10 years, this kind of extreme braggadocio kind of masculine craziness. Yeah, we're seeing it with all these people on the internet that 30 years ago would be characters in The Simpsons and now are just people that are, you know, on Twitter or whatever. So this is pretty nuts. Um, and like I just thought also a lot of people have been talking about this stuff in music in the last 10 years, but maybe it's more, this phrase of like show don't tell. And a lot
Hmm.
of people were telling, saying, oh, this is bad. You say, well, obviously it's bad. But I thought maybe it's effective to kind of show that this is bad and kind of you don't have to necessarily preach and say this is bad. It just kind of is obvious, I just thought it was a funny, subject matter.
Right. At the very start of the album, and maybe not to tell too much and go against to what you just said there, but I find the beginning of the record particularly interesting because in that moment, uh, I'm sort of like curious as to how we kind of make the transition into the rest of the record because for blues, would you say this is kind of the character narrating and then they're sort of inventing themselves out of this like sense of boredom and restlessness and kind of like contending with how mundane life feels? Or is this you sort of like inventing the fantasy or inventing the character just out of a need to kind of like break things up and escape from again, sort of like how boring and mundane sort of that first sort of like, slice of life image is at the start of the album?
I don't know. I mean, with this album, it was less a thing of having one character and one kind of through line story,
Hmm.
and more like a kind of atmosphere and a kind of um, what is the word? Cumulative kind of thing that builds on with each song. And like one of my favorite albums is the Blue Nile Hats. And this is an album that's not necessarily a concept album, but it's like each song builds on this atmosphere and builds on this sense of character and sense of kind of, time, place, kind of whatever it is, scenarios and all this stuff. Anyway, with this first song, Blues, I wanted to be basically like an overture. And this was a song structure that, I tried to do a few times in Black MIDI, which is the kind of something simple that slowly, slowly builds into insanity. You start with a simple premise and then you go and go and go and have this crazy music and crazy vocals on the top. Even going back to like Boom Boom Boom, the first song we put out, and then something like The Race from the third album, it's this idea of something slowly, slowly unraveling, something that's kind of going crazier and crazier. So with the song Blues, it was the same sort of thing, and it was kind of when initially we got the take and stuff, I thought, wow, this is the best time it's basically the same idea song wise, but this is really nailed the head on the hammer on the nail or whatever it is of this kind of song structure. So I thought it was only fair that that's the beginning of the album, a little bit like on Peter Gabriel's first solo album. He has a song called Moribund the Bergmeister or something, which is basically like a Genesis song.
Hmm.
So it's like it encapsulates his time in Genesis and then does that to kind of the furthest extent that he thinks it can, and then he has his first solo album after that. So I want to kind of sum up what I was trying to do with Black Midi, like what we were maybe trying to do as a band with this song, and then after that get into this new territory. But thematically, yeah, I don't know necessarily the exact like it's more like an overture and it's meant to be a blues which starts off in a mundane way, just talking about this character who's maybe 18 or so and thinks they're quite shit and gets further and further into talking about the boundless depths of the universe and all this like inevitable rhetoric writing of, losing your hands and limbs and all this stuff and body staging a civil war and all this outlandish, surreal imagery.
Hmm.
I don't know.
No, thank you for diving into that and explaining it. I did also want to kind of get deeper into this idea of telling now that you kind of mention it. And, obviously, as you just said, there's not a point on the album where you explicitly sort of tell the audience like, oh, this character is bad and this is what you should think about the character. But I feel
Hmm.
like in a way, toward the very end of the album with the magician, you do kind of like in your own way give us some tells or kind of like explain or get very meta with your own creative process. Like, do you feel like you kind of like broke the fourth wall a little bit on that record or that track, kind of, playing with the idea of like, am I joking around? Am I sort of like in a fantasy? Am I in a reality? It's like kind of like you're almost talking about your own abilities as an artist to create a world and present it to the audience in a certain fashion.
For sure. I mean, I love this album. I was kind of thinking like it seems like today the prime kind of way people listen to music and the kind of prime how do you the reason that a lot of music is made is to like listen to it on the train on the way to work
Hmm.
or to listen to it while you're cooking, to listen to it while you're doing other things,
Hmm.
you know? And it's to be almost a pleasant thing that kind of just goes on, you know? And so my thing with this album was to make the music maybe pleasant enough that that is possible, but jarring enough in sometimes that you're forced to listen to it, you know? So you're on a train, listen to this, and then it says some or other perverse thing, and you think, what the hell is this guy talking about, man? So, but yeah, maybe so. With this track, The Magician is all this stuff of like, this meta stuff of, it's a performance that you listen to on record, but it's speaking directly to you, but it's also existing in this fictional way, and all this thing of having dreams and this fantasy and this yearning feeling is the same reason I had this If You Are But a Dream as the last song. This kind of yearning feeling of something that you want but you can't have, or something that exists only in retrospect or whatever. um, I don't know for sure. I mean, I think part of the reason this magician song, a lot of people, latched onto it even before the album even came out, is it's kind of got this slightly abstract thing of you can have a lot of ascribe lots of different things to it, which is not necessarily the case for a lot of the other songs. A lot of the other songs are very clearly about some warlord or some, you know, heinous activity, whereas this song is more like, you know, more rhetorical, more like, let's see, let's explore.
Hmm. Do you feel like that this is kind of like an interesting creative I guess angle to discuss or contemplate, because as you're saying, there is a lot of music out there that sort of just seems like it exists to happen while something else is going on, which I mean, I guess to a degree has always been the case for music on some level. There's always been, music that's been sort of composed for dance contexts and so on and so forth. But like, I guess in your case, do you feel like you angled at least some of the music on this record, or some of the music that you make in general, purposefully with that intention just out of a desire to communicate directly with the audience, or do you personally feel like it's out of perceiving there being maybe a lack of effort on artists' part these days generally with like trying to break that wall and actually say something directly to the audience? Do you feel like there's like a void out there these days in the musical sphere in terms of like artists who actually want to say something to the audience in sort of like a direct and maybe even intimate fashion?
Well, it's the same with movies, but if you listen to very old-fashioned records, they're trying to capture a performance. They're trying to make it seem as if the album that you're listening to, Frank Sinatra, that you're listening to, or Nat King Cole on the radio, whatever, they could be in your living room.
Hmm.
They're trying to do this performance as three-dimensional as possible, and they always come up, use the proximity effect, come up right up to your ear and then go away. There's so much dynamics, right? The same with these the first films ever made. They would actually shoot the film from like as if they were in the first seats of the auditorium in a theater. So it's just like you were at a play or something.
Hmm.
And I think it's to do with all sorts of things, technology and changing tastes and everything. But basically, a lot of my favorite music has this intimacy and has this thing where it's a performance, is that there's a theatrical element to it. Um, and I think in the name of just like kind of sonic consonance, a lot of that has been lost. Where music, a lot of music almost is mixed in the same way that adverts on billboards are mixed in terms of blending in. Kind of, you listen to it and it's like, oh, okay, this is great and this is cool, but it's like so compressed and so kind of smoothed over that you miss a lot of it actually being a performance on some level. And also on the inverse, music that's kind of more imaginative or more experimental, more crazy, you know, it's almost like everyone says this where, oh, this album is great, but you have to listen to it like 10 times to get into it. Yeah.
Hmm.
And that's brilliant, but there's a slight contradiction there where it's music that has to be listened to quite a lot, but is often not at times, a lot of times not even that nice to listen to. So it's like you have to listen to this stuff that's not nice to listen to so many times before it does become nice to listen to. So I don't know. I was trying to find somewhere in the middle where it's music that's on first listen, there's still something to latch onto and there's still something nice about it,
Hmm.
but it does have this thing of the more you listen to it, you still can get different things and everything. And I don't know.
Just to kind of dig further into that, like, was there a balancing act during the recordings of these tracks? Because I don't know how many takes or how many times you had to go over these songs to sort of get them together and make them work. But, was there a balancing act between coming through with recordings and compositions that, frankly, are so detailed and multifaceted and multi-phased and complex, but still making it sound very live and in the moment? Was there a lot of changes and editing involved with getting these songs together? Or, were you able to kind of nail these tracks down in a way where you were able to keep the actual performances they're based off of, for the most part, intact?
Well, it's that whole thing of like I did these really detailed demos and I would do like sometimes drafts on the demos. Like I would do a song and then say, this doesn't work, need to do this again. Make sure the songs were kind of tested before I even thought about recording them. But as soon as we had the recording date set, partly due to kind of this kind of conscious restriction of time and like kind of setting this restriction so you had to work quick,
Hmm.
it would often be getting the songs in 2 or 3 takes. So, for example, when we did these songs in Brazil, like Holy Holy, Terra, all this, we'd play those songs 3 times and then that would be the take. And I think that goes a long way towards getting something good. It's often the first time someone plays something right is in some ways the best they're ever going to play it.
Right.
Because there's a slight, you're trying so hard not to mess the song up, just to play the right stuff, that there's a tension and you're concentrating on a very high level. Oftentimes, when you're kind of on tour and stuff, you end up playing the songs 50, 100 times. By that point, the level of autopilot has set in to such a degree that you're not even thinking anymore.
Hmm.
You're hardly like switched on at all. So, sure, you might get all the notes right, but it's just something missing in the intensity and in the like. Whereas, great musicians playing the songs for the third or fourth time always sounds amazing, is basically what I'm getting at. And you should try and maximize that as much as possible. And, you know, it was a combination of that and also the fact that every song would be guitar, bass, drums at least at the same time, sometimes even a keyboard and percussion as well. So half the album, yeah, it's bass, piano, keyboard, guitar, and percussion all at the same time. And then we do overdubs on top of that. But the overdubs can never ruin a great live take. Even if you go overboard with the overdubs or get the wrong things or overblow it, you can never fuck up a good live take.
Hmm. Considering how a lot of these musicians on the record you were working with for the first time and introducing to the songs for the first time, was the process of finding all the right people to bring these songs together difficult or, very long? Was it a very, I guess, like involved search?
Well, I'm very lucky, but over the 10 years of kind of doing music, playing around London, and then doing this band and playing around the world, we met loads of people. And there's loads of people that for a long time I had wanted to try and do music with,
Hmm.
but there hadn't been the reason to or the opportunity or whatever.
So you're keeping like
So
a
there was
mental Rolodex of all these people who you've met, and it's like, I'd really like to work with this person, this person.
pretty much, yeah. And
Hmm.
and also like a thing of you're in a band and it's great, and but there's always a thing of like, oh, hypothetically that would be interesting, but there's no reason to. Whereas this was a chance where it was like, okay, let's try this and let's try that. But then again, there was a lot of things, a lot of the musicians I played with on this album were pretty circumstantial. Like I keep mentioning the Brazil thing. The story there is that we had touring dates in Brazil with Black Midi
Hmm.
and 3 or 4 days off. And me and Seth, we've been trying to sort out a recording session in London. And with the song we wanted to do was Holy, Holy, and Terror and Through a War and stuff like that. And so we wanted to kind of get top session guys. We wanted to make it sound like Billie Jean, basically. We wanted to get guys that could really just play one groove for the whole song and it sounds good,
Right.
sounds like assured. But also guys that had experience playing this Latin music, because this was a lot of the influence of the album was stuff like Milton Nascimento or the Fania record stuff like Hector Lavoe. But then I remembered we're touring Brazil with Black Midi, so I just thought, why not? Let's just record it over there. I called up the one guy I know in Brazil, a guy called Fernando Dota, a guy who runs a thing called Balaclava Records. And he just said, yeah, of course, that's fine. I know musicians and I know studios, so I'll just call up these guys. And so, they weren't familiar with Black Midi. They weren't any guys I'd met before. We just got into the studio and just bashed it out. And they were like the songs and they were into it and they were amazing musicians. So it was very chill. So so sorry for a long-winded answer, but basically it's a combination of people that I've known for a long time and wanted to work with and kind of just on a whim, or not necessarily whim, but on an impulse, deciding, yeah, let's go for it. Let's record a song with these people that I barely know and I've just met. And with some, I don't even speak the same language. So it's a great vibe.
Right, right, exactly. So it's like you're literally relying on music to be the language to sort of like make things kind of make sense between all you guys.
Exactly.
Uh,
I just thought, yeah, yeah, sorry.
oh no, go on.
Just like it's just as much of a risk doing it, in a far-flung place than it is doing it in London in some degree. Because I mean, the risk is on the material if it's strong enough. And I just thought, what have we got to lose, really? If
Hmm.
the song is crap, it's gonna sound crap with the best musicians in the world and with the worst musicians in the world. It doesn't
Right.
matter really. Like, and it's more about if we can just get something to feel good and have a good atmosphere and positive, vibe. And yeah, also like going on tour to places like Brazil, it was always a thing of the standard of musicianship is insanely high. And you just always, as a musician, regardless of what kind of music you're playing or who you're going on tour with, there's a there's a desire to play with these people.
Hmm.
So I just thought, why not?
Um, it sounds like pretty early on in some of these recordings and these sessions and kind of conceptualizing and producing these tracks, Seth has been involved on some level. Like, obviously this is a solo album of yours. But at what point did it seem important to you to sort of like have a second mind in there production wise to sort of like bring things together and just like kind of make sure it's all, I guess, making sense, going well, you know, coming together cohesively? Like what does Seth bring to the table that just kind of felt like, you know, a need for you in the midst of this project?
Well, me and him are good bros.
Hmm.
He played in Black Midi for a few years, like first on keyboard, then on bass, like in a kind of session musician capacity, basically, when we were touring. And over that time, we really became brothers, you know? We really became good friends. And we were always talking about music and had a lot of kind of the Venn diagram was, you know, crossing over a fair bit in terms of what we appreciated, and not even necessarily on all the music we liked, but definitely for on the reasons why we liked it and the
Hmm.
reasons why we wanted to make music and the kind of music we wanted to make ultimately. And it was this whole thing of like so many other like things behind the decisions on this album. We just really got along and it was a nice atmosphere, positive, good vibe, good energy. So we just thought, you know, why not work with those people? I think there's a tendency sometimes to think, oh, we get in a big name producer, they're gonna help shape it and stuff, or they're gonna help us. And originally, when we were doing some sessions early on, you know, we were thinking, oh, we could go to this guy, we could go to that guy. But in the same logic of doing a solo album in the first place, thinking like, why wait till I'm 40 to do something that I always want to do instead of just doing it now? If I want to do it ultimately, let's just do it now.
Hmm.
Thinking, well, if we want to produce records ultimately, who's stopping us? Let's just do it now. It's not like you ascend the ranks and then one day someone says, "Oh, you're a producer now." People just decide one day that they're a producer. You know, maybe you have a lot of experience in the studio or whatever, but you know, I think it's fair enough to say if you want to be a producer, just have a go. And he's got a great understanding of the studio. That's the main thing, you know. He knows how sound works and how to chat with the engineers to get the sound we want and to make it work. And also, originally, this album was gonna be a kind of duo album with the two of us,
Hmm.
you know, and that was the goal. But as you know, as it was going on, it was more practical to kind of do it as my album first because I had more tunes basically, and it felt like you know we'll do a duo album at some point and we'll do his album, and it's more about just doing what's seems like it can get done rather than you know it all having to be perfect. Sorry, this is another ramble, but that's a big tendency nowadays is that people seem to work on albums for years and years until it's perfect and try and get every little thing right. And you know, all my favorite musicians, they just had this thing of constantly trying to do an album a year and just keep improving gradually. You know, it's better to do four albums and then between the first and the fourth, it's amazing, like such a big jump. Then wait 4 years and do something that's marginally better. I don't know.
I mean, you know, it's kind of, frankly, it's kind of insane to hear you say that because, you know, I mean, I feel like albums that have the level of detail musically and narratively that the new sound brings to the table. I mean, it sounds like an album that you've worked on for like 5 years. Frankly, I mean,
Thank you, man. Yeah,
is what it sounds like.
yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, maybe yeah. It's like in some way, like there's little riffs on this album that I've gone back a long time, thinking like, oh, I've always wanted to use this or certain lines and stuff. But recording wise, it was all in the last, you know, half year to a year. So it's been
Yeah,
pretty. Yeah,
yeah, well, yeah. I mean, it speaks to the idea. I mean, even like the magician has been performed in like a black midi context before. It speaks to the idea that like as you continue doing what you do, you're kind of picking up and conceptualizing these ideas like here and there a little bit, and then it's all kind of coming together. Like in you know after sort of like it's snowballing over time gradually.
yeah. Sometimes it's like you have a few things that are kind of slowly picking up steam, and then all of a sudden you just need one kick to do the rest really quickly. You know?
Right, right, right. You know, I also wanted to ask you like you're making a lot of, as you were saying earlier, kind of statements through this character portrait and the lyrics on the record and these, you know, different individuals or individual that you're sort of displaying the personality of. But what do you feel like is sort of the statement that you're making sonically and musically on this record. Because for anything that has the sort of experimental and prog leanings that your music most definitely does, it's kind of ballsy to name your new record the new sound. You know what I mean? Like I feel like as a musician, you're really kind of like putting a line in the sand, you're planting a flag down and just being like, bitch, this shit is new, you know? So it's like, for you, like what exactly does the idea of a or the new sound really mean? Especially given that like, the title track of the record, the song with that title is an instrumental, you know?
Mhm.
Is it literally kind of the very unique mix of influences that we hear on that particular track, or is it something beyond that?
Well, it's just bombast, really.
Hmm.
I had the idea for the name of this album being a new sound before I had half the songs done.
Hmm.
So it was more of a kind of goal and a kind of like, yeah, probably pretty dumb to call the album that, but I thought, music is dumb in a lot of ways, and it's good to just have this goal and say, who cares? Let's go for it. This is going to be the new sound, at
Right.
least for me, you
Okay.
know? And also it's this, I love this kitschy kind of thing of naming your album stuff like the new sound. I mean, it's very 1950s. It's very like the genius of Bud Powell or kind of the magnificent, Charlie Christian or whatever. Or, a lot of these old jazz albums, they have these funny names. And I
Yeah.
just
Or
like
the
that
or
kind
the
of,
or the shape of jazz to come.
for sure, exactly. Yeah, brilliant. Yeah. And you know, who cares? But in terms of like an actual definition of the new sound or whatever, if there is one, it's just this thing of, I think, taking the best of experimental music, of crazy out there music, of crazy like, music that I'm really into that's really like heady and you have to put your thinking cap on and subscribe to Wire magazine or whatever it is, but also stupid music or music that's just for fun.
Hmm.
And I because essentially music is just for fun, really. I think it's like a purely kind of, you know, what is even the word? Like it's a not a pastime, but it's the best thing in the world, but it's also maybe is the best thing in the world because it doesn't really have a quantifiable meaning really, except other than to be like to make you feel so good, you know?
Hmm. No, okay, I get that. I get what you're saying there. I feel like there is though for you as an artist and as a musician though. Maybe it's just meant to sort of be fun for the audience on some on some level or for the most part. But I wanted to ask you with like some of the statements and some of the intentions that are kind of stated within these tracks, and we've sort of like established that like again you're sort of existing in or sort of like playing out a fantasy of sorts on this song. You're sort of like displaying a character or an archetype or a trope, and I feel like naturally there are going to be some people wondering, even with what you say on the magician, like how much crossover is there between like the role player and the role, and in that specific regard, the one thing that I sort of am curious about that sort of comes up as a theme throughout a lot of these tracks is this idea of being considered, being remembered, being thought of, being big or important enough to, matter to other people. And, obviously this is something that is a concern of the character, but do you as an individual on a personal level, and especially as an artist and a musician who's in the limelight to the degree that you are, do you like struggle with this idea of like, am I doing something or am I making something that people are actually going to think of a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now? Or does that, on a personal level, not even really matter to you ultimately?
Well, I mean, I think it's healthy, and I think I do struggle with this idea of is this music worth being made, right?
Hmm.
Because, there's no point doing music that doesn't need to exist.
Hmm.
I mean, you can really boil down a lot of the difference between good music and bad music is a lot of music doesn't really sound like it needs to exist, whereas you put on kind of
that's
the,
that's so fucking harsh, but it's also like kind of true. Like
I
this,
think so, yeah.
there's a lot of music out there that you're just kind of like, I feel like I've heard this 10 times already.
Yeah, like I just think, and in the inverse as well. Yeah, listen to even if it's not your favorite album, some of these albums, but like whatever, Wish You Were Here, Kind of Blue, um, you know, the Robert Johnson, the Delta Blues Singers or whatever, or Prince, uh, Purple Rain, whatever. You listen to one of these albums, and within 10 seconds, it sounds like something that should exist. It sounds like it really sounds urgent, vital. It sounds like you've already heard it before a lot of the time.
Hmm.
I feel like that's the best music where it does have this thing where it's like, oh yeah, of course. You're not you I love thinking about this thing with great books, with great movies, with great albums. Like 10 seconds in, a minute in, you feel like you're in safe hands. You really trust this person because straight away it feels like an assured thing. Like, oh yeah, of course, that makes this is good. And of course, there's some albums where you need to go on a journey and get into it and stuff. But I feel like even with albums that are uncompromising, that are crazy, there's a reason you want to listen to it again. There's a thing which seems like not just messing around. It seems like it's by design where it's crazy and it's uncompromising, but you do want to listen to it again. You do want to at least try. You know, I don't know. And so much crap music, you just listen to it and think like, why?
Hmm. And, if hypothetically, 10 years from now, people aren't even sort of like considering this album anymore. For you personally, would that mean to you on some level that this was like all for nothing? Or would you still like personally feel like you got something out of the process and it was important for you to do though?
Well, that's the thing is like, it's kind of neither here nor there.
Hmm.
It's like, it's quite funny because people, as Black Midi went on, it was funny because when the first album came out, there was lots of, negative response to it. And especially on comments and stuff, it was often stuff like, oh, if these guys are good, if only they were all playing the same song. Uh, the drummer's good, but the rest of them are crap. What is this guy talking about? This is just, nonsense. These guys they don't know what they're doing. This is all over the place. And then the second album came out and it was a better response. And the third album came out and there was a generally better response. But people all then at that point said, oh, like this is okay, but it doesn't compare to how good the first album was or something like that, And it's like, seriously, dude, like, people change what they're saying all the time. So you can't really care about it. You just have to do what you were going to do anyway and just have a go and just make sure you're happy with it. And make music that you would want to listen to. It's not about making music only for yourself. It's making music that's only for yourself as a listener.
Upon initial impact with this record, have there been any sort of like similar reactions or comments that you've seen that to you have felt like sort of like confusing, or this feels like just a repeat of what I've already dealt with Black Midi?
To be honest, like the response to this album has been really good.
Hmm.
Like a lot better than I thought it would be, to be honest. Like people seem to be genuinely enjoying it, you know?
Hmm.
And it's not for everybody, and that's great. It's like for whoever wants to listen to it, whoever doesn't want to listen to it, also great. But it's surprised me that it's had, people are enjoying it basically.
Hmm.
And it seems one reaction that was fairly common with Black Midi was people would say, I love this is great, but I want to like it more. They would say, I love the idea of this music, but it's not necessarily resonating like on a visceral level. But people seem with this one to be, enjoying it just in a way that you like, Mariah Carey or whatever, maybe. Just more something you can just listen to. So that's cool, who
Hmm.
cares? But either way, it's like, whatever.
You were talking earlier about your artistic whims and just kind of allowing them to bring you to wherever they're going to bring you. Like if I'm going to do a solo album, why wait till I'm 40 to do it? Why not do it now? We could do another solo record. We could do a collab album with Seth. We could just do a Seth record, whatever, whatever, whatever. At this point right now, with as much as you can tell the future. I know you're not Nostradamus, but immediately after this album cycle and after the performances behind this record are sort of like over and done with, what do you feel like the next thing uh, sort of is for you personally and creatively?
I mean, ultimately, I just want to keep doing albums.
Hmm.
Like, I want to have this, like, even self-enforced pressure of just finishing things and getting things done. I have a fair amount of songs either half done or kind of in a good place. So just whenever it's convenient after some touring and stuff, I just want to get back to it and try and finish another thing, you know? Whether that's an album or anything, preferably an album. But we'll see. It should be good.
Well, it seems like for you personally, like there's this really big emphasis on the idea of, again, getting things done in efficiency and like completing things and finishing things. And now that you sort of like have that contrast here between Black Midi, between this new record and other things that you've done, like what process creatively do you feel like is bringing you those results that you want? Do you feel like you work faster in a context where it's like, oh, I'm doing a solo album and we're finding guests or studio musicians, I have a producer at my side who I trust and I'm working with very closely? Or do you feel like you get more done in a band where maybe you have other people contributing and maybe certain things happen faster because there are other hands at play to sort of like do certain things or sort of come together with certain ideas? Like in which context do you feel like you work faster and do things more efficiently?
Well, this first album, this new sound, has been a unique process, you know? It's something where it's kind of half of the kind of process was just psyching myself up to even do it.
Hmm.
Like when you're working with session musicians, when you're renting out the studio, you're committing to pay these people who have never played the song before,
Hmm.
and you don't know that it's gonna work. So the first time doing it after working with the band, where you can just book a rehearsal or whatever, or go through things, or you know that these kind of you know the musical styles of each person, it was a really like kind of uncertain thing, and it was like, whoa, is this gonna work? Is this not? So a lot of the time in the recording process was just kind of figuring out if that would even work, like trying to psych myself up to even commit to doing it.
Hmm.
Um, but once we got in the studio and once we were actually in the swing of it, it was always incredibly quick. So I don't see any reason why from now on it's like an even quicker process than working with a band.
Yeah,
It's
now
quite addictive.
the seal is broken and you've gone over the hump. So
Exactly. It's not gonna get harder than this, you know? So let's see.
okay, all right.
I think in terms just in terms of like, you know, the pressure of it, the kind of
Right,
like,
right.
oh, it's the first time, who knows how it's gonna work. So now it's this album has come out and to some degree it's done okay. People like it. You know, I think from here on out, hopefully it's just even smoother and even, you know,
You know,
more.
are there any things, be it in a band context or sort of, you know, a Seth collab context or a solo context, that you could see yourself wanting to do down the road on a future record, or maybe that you wanted to do on this album, but maybe it didn't feel like the right time because there was so much pressure to make sure it all went well because it was like the first time and you're sort of dealing with the fear and difficulty of like, oh, this is like my first outing in this way and I really want it to go right, and maybe kind of like, you know, doing this or that, I could end up overextending myself or something.
Well, because this was the first time, I almost there was a slight kind of effort to accurately portray each of the musical things that I'm really into.
Hmm.
So there was a lot on this album where it's like, ah, let's try, you know, have this kind of song and this kind of song. I think there was a, you know, there's a wide musical and sonic palette and kind of like different influences coming in and stuff. And, you know, part of that is just how it happened, but there was also definitely a thing of like, this might be the only solo album I make. So I want to make sure that it's like, you know,
Like it
I
encompass,
have a
you
go
want
at,
to make it like encompass everything.
yeah, or at least try a few different things, you know?
Hmm.
So maybe with the next thing, it will be more like, let's pick one of these musical strands and explore it more thoroughly.
Hmm.
You know, it might be the fusion thing. So do an album which is more, has a few more instrumental songs maybe, and has a few more of an emphasis on like blistering fusion. Or it might be the song type thing. It might be the kind of ballad thing, or it might be whatever. It's just, I don't know. Maybe part of this why this album, you know, people like it is this contrast between all these different things. But maybe exploring one more thoroughly could result in better songs. Who knows? But it's interesting. Like basically, I feel less pressure for the next thing to for it to go completely wrong because I've done this one now and it's been okay. So we can try something different with this one. But let's see. I don't know.
Okay. Uh, you know, what one more sort of like a question about kind of the progression of the album, specifically how you finish it off. Like, you mentioned Sinatra earlier. You finished the album off with a track that is famously performed by Sinatra. Um, for the album itself, for this solo outing, for what we could kind of perceive as the narrative of the album, what do you feel like this track contributes to the track list of the record? Like, why was this important to sort of, finish the album off in this way?
Well, I heard this song many years ago and I really liked it. And I thought, it's not the most well-known song that Sinatra did. And he did it kind of early on in his career in the 40s. So he has his voice sounds pretty different. It's kind of got this youthful, slight hint of uncertainty to it, right?
Mm,
And I just love the song. I think it's a brilliant song, and uniquely for a kind of standard jazz standard or whatever. I like the lyrics. Most jazz standard songs have really terrible lyrics. They're brilliant, perfect songs, but like so cheesy lyrics about the smile of the moon or something. And um with this song, I just love the lyric. I love how it works with the melody and love how it works with the form of the song. It's talking about if you have had a dream, it's this yearning thing, what da, 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 and the melody has this same yearning kind of structure to it where it's like not never quite resolving and going on and going on. It's a brilliant song. And I was just listening to that song again while I was making this album, and similar thing happened with the album cover, where I was listening to this song as we were doing the album and thought, this kind of ties in quite well with a lot of the songs we're doing here.
mm,
And I had this idea of doing it with a more brass band Salvation Army type arrangement, something like from maybe one of the slow songs on Tom Waits' Swordfish Trombones, like with this New Orleans kind of thing. When what's that one? In the Neighborhood,
mm,
or maybe something like from Lester Bowie's brass ensemble in the 80s, like art ensemble of Chicago, that stuff and all of that stuff. But anyway, this kind of sound I thought would lend itself to the song, this funereal kind of somber um arrangement. So I contacted, some people to try and do an arrangement, and this guy called Harvey came up with a brilliant arrangement, and we just recorded it, and I sang it. And after the context of all the songs on this album, it has quite a different feel. But I just love that song. It's a brilliant song, and I think boy, it was should be, you know, at least in some new context performed again.
No, no, it does really add to the record so much, especially given like all the fantastical themes of the lyrics. And I was kind of taken aback to because I wasn't really familiar with the song prior to the record. I was taken aback to find that it was not an original. I mean, there was something about it that felt like a little different from every other track on the record, and I thought it was mostly coming from a place of like, oh, I'm just going to like, copy a certain vibe or an idea. But I was glad I sort of like, intuitively presumed that like this might be sort of like a take on something. But like, a part of what does make it feel like an original is that, yeah, the lyrics don't necessarily feel reflective of the era that they come from. That's partially why I feel like a lot of Chet Baker's vocal jazz stuff kind of stands out for the era that it came out of, because a lot of the songs that he would sing were actually quite depressing in sort of like a
Mhm.
fatalistic
Yes, yeah, yeah,
kind of way. It's like, it's not your usual grade of like blues or vocal jazz kind of like, sadness. It's like, you're really like kind of coming from a super dark place. And, the fact that that song is, sort of playing with, the idea of like, living in a sad sort of made up kind of dreamlike reality. It just kind of makes it so interesting. And again, it really just like kind of, puts the cap on the record in a really great way.
yeah.
Thank you very much for coming through and kind of like, bringing so much insight to this very dense, very interesting, very creative record. And, again, I love that you took the time, and, we're just an open book in the convo.
Brilliant, man. Thanks for having me. It's always a good vibe, and I see you next time, man.
All right. We'll all be looking forward to the next thing that you do, the next thing that you're working on. And I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Yeah, you too, man. Have a good one.
All right. Bye.
See you. Bye.